To make a gradient, I click on Shape, and drag a rectangle. In the Colors panel, behind Fill mode, I choose Gradient. For the left color, I choose Yellow. I click on the right color stop, and choose Green. If I want a third color, I can add a color stop by clicking below the gradient. I make the third color stop Magenta. Now let's make a gradient and give it an angle. I drag a rectangle. I choose Gradient. I will make the left color stop lighter. To do this, I lower the shade value. To change the direction of the gradient, I click on Move Vector. I change the direction of the gradient by dragging the end vector point. I close the gradient vector window. Now let's make a radial gradient. I drag a circle. I make the frame 100 mm. I choose Gradient. Now instead of a linear gradient, I choose Radial. For my left color stop, I choose Cyan. We see the gradient doesn't start from the middle yet. So I click on Move Vector. The radial gradient has an extra vector point, called the focal point. I can move the focal point around, which looks a bit like a light source. In Scribus, the start of the focal point, and its direction, can be adjusted independently. As we see, the focal point can be useful for simulating three-dimensional surfaces. What I want is the gradient to start from the middle. To get this, I need both the focal point and start point to be placed in the center. So I drag the start point to the middle. And I also drag the focal point to the middle. I made the frame 100 mm, which we can see at end. If I want to be exact, I can copy the second value of end, which is 50 mm, and paste it to focal and start. Now the gradient is perfectly in the middle. I can make the gradient smaller, by scrolling with my mouse in the end input box. I get the same result, when I move the right color stop to the left. I can also make the gradient smaller on just one axis, by adjusting scale. The many options of the radial gradient in Scribus, secures maximum compatibility with artwork coming from Inkscape. Now let's make the summer sale icon. I click on the polygon tool, and keep my mouse pressed down. Then I click on Properties. I want 24 corners, and I set inner curvature to 60%. I press Ctrl, and drag the icon. In the Properties panel, I lock width and height. I make the icon 130 mm, and press Enter. I want no stroke. For my fill, I don't want a solid color, but a gradient. I want a radial gradient. For the inner color, I choose Sun. And for the outer color, I choose Orange. I click on Move Vector. I copy the 65 mm value, to paste it to focal and start. I close the gradient window. I select the yellow stop, and make the yellow area larger, by scrolling in the Position Entry field. I drag a text frame, and type, Summer. For my font I choose Lead Gothic, and I choose Italic. I make the text 100 point. I open Color and Effects, and give the text a shadow color. I open Advanced Settings, and scale the height of the characters to 80%. I rotate the text 13 degrees. I duplicate the text frame by pressing Ctrl-C, and Ctrl-V. I make the duplicate text white. With my arrow keys, I position the white text. I duplicate the text frame by pressing Ctrl-C, and Ctrl-V. I click on the text frame above, and then Ctrl-click on it, to select the text frame below it. Then I hold the Shift key, and click again, to add the white text. I right-click, and choose Group. I double-click on the text frame below, and type Sail. I give the text the shadow color and make it 150 point. I duplicate the text frame again. I make the duplicate text white. With my arrow keys, I position the white text. I Ctrl-click on the text frame, to select the text frame below it. Then I hold the Shift key, and click again, to add the white text. I right-click, and choose Group. I position the text. I Alt-drag over the text and icon. I right-click, and choose Group. I can now position, and scale the icon.